Hey everybody, I'm Connor, and as you can see, today Sydney's not with me. She's close by, but today I'm going to be sharing my testimony. So if you could like, subscribe, that would be great. That really helps us out more than you guys know. That gets us out to more people, and that's our biggest goal. This is the most in-depth and extensive I've ever went into my testimony and all the things that I've been through. So I grew up in a relatively wealthy family. There wasn't really anything I didn't have or anything that I wanted that I didn't have or have access to. It was a Christian household. I had really good solid friends and stuff. We had a big house and all sorts of go-karts and four-wheelers and dirt bikes. I just grew up really fortunate, and I don't think I realized it at a young age that everything I had, I just thought that oh well, this is normal and stuff. So when I turned about 15, I guess I just made a change with who I hung out with. Is more of a rebellious stage, and I started getting into trouble a little more and staying away from the house a lot more and maybe lying about where I was, and that continued, and I started to smoke pot and drink. When I was 15, I actually smoked crack at a college party. It was some crackhead came in at 3 a.m. to this party, and I was the only person still awake, and just went in the bathroom and smoked crack as a 15-year-old. So that kind of jump-started my whole getting into drugs. So that was going on, and then me smoking pot and stuff. But when I turned 16, I got caught with shrooms in my car. My dad was doing an oil change or something on my vehicle and looked in the sunglass, the sunglass holder that's above the center console, and he pushed it, and I don't know, he probably was kind of suspicious of me. He could tell that things had changed in my attitude and who I was hanging out with. So that night, my mom was actually out of town. She was in Florida, and me and my dad were not really getting along because I was it was all my fault. I was a punk. But he told me that I had to leave, and he took the keys out of my Jeep and took the keys out of the Jaguar, which were both mine when I was 16. So yeah, it kind of tells you how privileged I was. Yeah, so he pulled the keys out of the vehicles, and then I just started walking. It was midnight, and my brother came by and picked me up and took me to a friend's house. That week school was supposed to be starting, and I hadn't talked to my dad or anything, so I just didn't sign up for school, and I wasn't going to school, and I just moved in with a friend who had already graduated. It helped me in my immediate situation, but it didn't help with my drug use or drinking or anything like that. So about 2 weeks after school had started, my aunt came by and was like, hey, you can't just quit on life or whatever, you have to go enroll in school. So she helped me enroll in school 2 weeks late at a school that I hadn't been going to. After I got re-enrolled in school, my parents had let me move back in, but things were going kind of smooth or whatever for a couple months. And then I was ungrounded, and I went out one night with on a Saturday night and robbed somebody's house. So he got caught, but he didn't tell on me, and I don't know who told me, but they're hey, so-and-so got caught, but the cops hadn't come to me or anything yet. So I ended up turning myself in, and I was charged as a minor for breaking and entering, and I just did 2 weeks in juvie, and then I was on house arrest for 6 months, I think, and I was on probation for a year. But I completed all that successfully. I switched schools. My parents let me switch schools because of the embarrassment. So at this point in my life, things were honestly still pretty good. Lived in a nice house and had nice things, but things with my parents started to fall apart, and they ended up getting a divorce right around in that time. And I don't blame myself, but I know that a 17-year-old who is getting caught with drugs and not doing well in school and going to juvie for a robbery and stuff doesn't make a marriage any easier when it's already having problems. So yeah, it was all kind of compiling around that age, around 17. And then on top of that, I started having sex. So I just had a whole lot going on between ages of 16 and 17. That was a really rough start to being an adult, and which I do blame myself for literally all of this, because I made those choices and I had everything handed to me, and I could have been a doctor or a lawyer or anything, but I chose a different path at that point. So when I was 18, I moved out for real. My parents had split up at this point, and I was living with my mom, and I don't know, I was just still being a punk, and I was just I'm not doing this anymore. I thought I could do it better on my own. So when I was 18, I moved out and I didn't really have a plan. So one of my friend's moms, I was over at one of my friend's houses a couple days later, and I was kind of telling her what was going on. And she's like, well, where are you staying at tonight? And I was like, I don't know, like maybe my car or something. And she was like, are you homeless? And I remember I was like, no, I'm not homeless. I'm just like, I don't really know where I'm gonna stay. And she's like, okay, well, you're gonna stay with us until you can get things figured out. And that was like a huge help. She was just like a mother figure, and she really wanted the best for me. And she just like, I don't know, she had a huge heart for me. But one thing I didn't have was still somebody who was pushing me to go to school, saying, hey, you need to go to school, you need to get good grades and all that stuff. So my senior year, that was all my senior year, I graduated, but I missed the maximum amount of days that I could and still graduate. It was like 18 days the second half of the school year, and I missed 18 days. And actually my school counselor gave me credits for a class that I never took. So I really shouldn't have graduated. So when I graduated, I didn't really have any direction in life. I hadn't planned on going to college, but after I graduated, it was just like all parties and drugs and sex and just like a really not a great lifestyle. But I did use I was like using pot a lot. So I moved into a house with a couple of my friends, and basically it was a big party house. And sometime during this time, one of my friends asked if I knew where I could get like a pretty big amount of weed. I said, yeah, I know some people in Fort Wayne. So I contacted the people and they directed me to some other people. So we're going to meet up and we have like all this cash on us, or they gave us an address, and we get there and it's like this abandoned house, which is pretty fishy to begin with, but we're like, whatever, this is a drug deal. It's not like, not really anything out of the ordinary. So as soon as I like get to the door, they like grab me by the shirt and like pull me in and throw me. And then the guy I was with, they grab him and like hold him up against the wall. And the guy that was right in front of me had a gun pointed at me, and he's telling me to like, give me all your money, give me everything you got. And I look over, and the guy I was with, his head was up against the wall, and there was like a pistol pointed up, like holding his head up against the wall. And he's just like kind of standing there. So he had a gun on him, I had a gun on me, and then there were two guys behind them that were like basically just had guns pointed at us as well. I think we're going there expecting to spend like $2,400, and they got $4,000 off of us and our cell phones, and we escaped with our lives basically, and didn't even really learn my lesson because I didn't change my lifestyle or anything like that. It kind of just shows how much of a cloud my life was in, because I like still didn't think like, oh, there's a better way, like I can do better than this. I'm getting robbed, I'm doing all sorts of drugs, like my life is like really low quality. But still, even at that point, I wasn't changing my ways. I remember one night I used so much cocaine that it was like the next morning, and somebody was like, hey, you got that like $20 you owe me or something. And I leaned over my bed, I kept my shoes under my bed I put my wallet in them, so nobody, like it was a party house. So I put my wallet in my shoes and put it under my bed. So I like leaned over to get my wallet out, and when I leaned over, my nose started bleeding, but it was like bleeding so heavily, it was like somebody literally, like if you turn on a faucet a little bit and it's like more than a drip, but it's just like a stream is coming out. It was literally blood just like pouring out of my nose. And still that wasn't a wake-up call for me somehow, but I remember that sticking out. It was like, oh my gosh, like this is getting out of control. This whole time I was just using drugs, like literally on a nightly basis. The house we lived at, it was just like me and a couple of buddies. So like all my high school friends that like couldn't drink at their house or party at their house or smoke at their house or whatever would just come over to our place. Like they would bring their pot or their drugs or beer, and just if they wanted to party or whatever, even on a weeknight. So I would say on average for a good year and a half, I drank literally like 7 days a week. I did drugs probably 5 or 6 days a week, maybe 7 days a week. And then there were other drugs and stuff. If anybody wanted to like drop acid or anything, they would come over, and they'd always bring enough for like me or my buddies to do. So yeah, that went on for like a year and a half. So that kind of came to a point one night, I guess it would be morning, like July of 2012 or probably 2013. And that's when I overdosed pretty bad. I tried some drugs that I had never tried before, and I overdosed on peyote. The nurse said that the toxicology report said that the amount of drugs I took could have killed 3 people. So I was just thankful to be alive. At like 4 a.m., The cops said that they found me in an intersection in just like a pair of basketball shorts, running around and like directing traffic. And I can remember like bits and pieces. I remember somebody honking at me, and it threw me off because I didn't know what was going, like why they were honking. And it just like brought me back to reality for a second. Like, wait, where am I? And then I remember a cop pulling up, and I don't remember a lot of that night at all. The next thing, like the next flashback I have is like getting my face shoved into the ground. And I wake up the next morning in the hospital, and my lawyer's standing over me talking to me. This is the next thing I remember. And my mom's like sitting in the corner crying, and I had like my head was strapped back to the hospital bed, and my arms and legs were handcuffed to the hospital bed, and I had a catheter in, and I was still like tripping balls. And there was like blood. I could like look down a little bit, and I could see that there was blood on me. I didn't really know what my lawyer was saying. Like, this is just like my first like back to reality, and like I'm taking all this in at once. But the cops said that it took 4 cops to get me down and 7 into a cop car, and they beat me up pretty good, but they didn't press any charges. I think they just beat me up so bad that, in my opinion, they didn't press charges because they just got the best of me that night and put a whooping on me pretty good. So when I'm in the hospital and I'm still blacked out, I have this out-of-body experience. My consciousness is like in this totally black void area, and I didn't really know what was going on or anything. But then, like, you know when a door opens, like if you're in a black room and a door opens and there's a light on the other side, so there's like a beam of light that all of a sudden like is very clear in the room. It felt kind of like that, like a door opened and the light hit me, and I could feel like the light like just go through me. And it was such an overwhelmingly positive feeling. It felt like there was literally like water like running through me, and it was such a positive, just overflowing like love, what the light felt like. So I'm like moving towards the light, and I'm like trying to get closer and trying to get closer and trying to get to where the like source is, and I just feel that like I can't get to it anymore, and I'm like, I get pulled backwards away from it, and the light just shuts off, like the door shuts, and I'm in complete blackness again. And like, I can't describe like the sorrow and despair that came over me. Is like any positive thing that had ever happened got sucked out of me, and just like filled with depression and sadness. But in that moment, I felt like that was God's, I don't know if that was God's presence or God's glory shining on me. I didn't see like the face of God, obviously, or anything, but just that presence was such an overwhelmingly positive feeling. And I feel like the reason that I got pulled away from that and that I was cut off from that light and from that feeling was because in my life I wasn't close with God. I had no relationship with God. And I know that like, and at that moment, if I would have died, I would have been cut off from the light. But I woke up in the hospital sometime after that. I don't know, like the next thing I remember is waking up. I wouldn't say that night changed my life completely for the better, but it did make me wake up a little bit to see that I like couldn't sustain living like that. I knew I couldn't stay doing the same thing and think that I wasn't gonna end up dead or just a homeless drug addict. So all that went on until I was about 22. So my mom had started dating another guy by this time, and her and I think it was fiance at that time decided to move to Georgia. I decided to go with them just to get away from the crowd that I was in and to get away from that lifestyle a little bit. And that really changed things. I quit smoking pot, I quit doing drugs and everything, but I still drank, which that wasn't really out of hand, like on a daily basis or anything. Just me going out on just weekends was like light years better than where I had just been a month before. So I lived in Georgia for about 2 years and got a lot of things straightened out. Then I decided to move back to Indiana, like where the rest of my family was. My mom was still in Georgia at that point, but my brothers and sisters and dad and stepmom were all in Indiana, and I missed those guys. So I ended up moving back to Indiana when I was about 24. I thought I could handle making the right decisions and stuff like that, but that didn't last long at all. I just got back into basically the same thing that I was doing before, except worse, probably this time around. Well, I started hanging out with friends that I'd hung out with before. I was dropping acid and doing coke and drinking and smoking pot. very regularly again. And then it all kind of led to, I just started doing meth, got introduced, and that's kind of where things really started to spiral downward. So all the way up until this point, from like 17 to 23, I was like having sex quite a bit. I was very promiscuous by this point. I'd started using meth on top of all the other drugs. It started out where it's just like maybe once or twice a month on the weekends, or maybe 3 times like throughout the month. And it didn't really make me think like, oh, this is so amazing, but you could see how people could very easily get addicted to it. But that escalated into using it like throughout the week. And before I knew it, I was jobless, basically homeless. I was staying with a friend and smoking meth and all sorts of other drugs. So it kind of all came to a pinnacle where I was using meth pretty frequently. And this one morning at like 4 a.m., I'd smoked more meth than I'd ever had before. And it kept me up for like 2 or 3 days straight. I hadn't eaten in like 2 or 3 days. I like wasn't hungry because of it. And then I was coming down and I was driving and I was just like contemplating my life. Like, what have I gotten myself into? I'm basically at like rock bottom. Like I couldn't get a job. I couldn't like do anything for myself basically because of where I'd put myself. And Something in the Water by Carrie Underwood came on. And I just like remembered how good my childhood was and how blessed my childhood was. And like, because my father was always like a very Christian type of guy, and like always like gave all of his success to God. Like if anybody asked, he was always just like, it's all God. And me and my dad hadn't really had a very good conversation throughout all those years because of me being a punk and stuff, and thinking that I knew better. But I gave him a call. It was probably 10 o'clock at night. I was coming down from like a meth high, and that song came on. I gave him a call. I think I like woke him up or something, and he's like, you can come to church in the morning or whatever if you want to. I didn't give him all the details of where I was, but like something changed inside of me that said like, this has to stop. And I knew that my dad was gonna be there for me. And that song just like made me reminisce of my childhood, of thinking like all the things that God had done for me and my family. So I would say at that point, I was leaning on my dad, I think, more than God. I like went to my dad to fix everything and not to God. But my dad, the best thing about him is that he led me to God, and he's like, yeah, you need to be coming to church and like stuff like that. And he would like always be so supportive. He helped me get a job, helped me financially, and was literally my biggest supporter. And finally, I just like gave it like my whole life to God. And at this point in my life, things started getting really clear for me on what my life was supposed to be like, and the direction that I was going on, and like how that was so detrimental and how this was so much better. It just felt like the fog had lifted off of my life. Like as soon as I went to God, he like opened my eyes to like how clouded my judgment was before, and I could make decisions so much clearer and easily. There's not like a really complex story about the transformation, like how God changed my life, but it's very like to the point, and just like, this is what you had. You can see the error of your ways, and you can see how I want you to live. And he just like cut that like straight down the middle, and like he made it very obvious to me on what his desires were for me. And this is really where like God started to show me that like Christianity isn't just a bunch of sacrifices, but there's so many blessings that go along with it. Like sure, if you live your life right and you do what you're supposed to, then there's benefits to that. But God like just like really started pouring his blessings out, just like friendships with my family members, like financially, just my happiness and my joy and my prosperity just overall was just magnified when I allowed God to have my life. So after that night, I remember my dad praying for me at his house, and I didn't have a single withdrawal symptom from any drug or alcohol. And at that point, I'd been drinking on a daily basis basically for 6 years, 5 years probably. I never got shaky or anything. I never got like meth withdrawals. I never got achy. I never got like withdrawals from like literally any drug, like Coke or anything. And I was just completely free of everything. I craved alcohol or whatever, but I like wouldn't go near it because I was like, man, like God has done so much for me. Like I would hate to just go down that spiral again. But I ended up getting saved. I got a part of my dad's church, and my dad and my pastor were both really big roles in me getting to that point, and then me staying on the right path and encouraging me. I know I leaned on my dad a lot during like the next 2 years. I was over there like 3 or 4 days a week at his house. We would like basically have church like every night over there. And my dad inspired me to go to Bible college. I think I was 24 or 25, and went out to Colorado to Charis Bible College for a year, and that was just a really amazing time in my life. And then moved back. I'd still had like ups and downs once I moved back, nothing like drug related or anything. It was hard for me because, you know, you grow up with a group of best friends and you stay or you live like in that area, like you really have to try to convince yourself like, hey, this isn't the right thing for me to do. Like I know where that's gonna lead. But I finally got to where like, hey, I can do this. Like things aren't really a temptation for me. So I ended up moving home after Bible college, and I was feeling like really good about myself, and I like had discernment, and I knew like what my limits were as far as like who I should hang out with and what environment I could be around and still be able to make the right decisions. So everything was going really good, and I think I just kind of pushed myself a little bit to like the next step, which would be, to me, it was like finding a wife and like becoming a man. I don't know why in my head that was something that had to be done, but I remember I was just like, okay, well, this is the next step in life. I need to like get it going and get it started. And I just got in a relationship that wasn't really healthy at all. It just wasn't the right person, the right time, or the right relationship. Like the relationship just like didn't have any aspects that it would take to prosper. I remember it was just like a very argumentative relationship. I just felt pressured to like get married. It just felt like there was pressure on myself to like move forward in my life, and that was the next thing to do. And we got married in spite of all the negativity, and that lasted from the time we moved in together after being married until the time I moved out was 38 days. And the biggest mistake I'd ever made at that point in my life, I think, was getting married. God wasn't leading me into this marriage. That was something I did on my own, and that's why the whole thing wasn't blessed. And I'm not saying that once I got married, because I didn't have, that wasn't God's plan for me, that God wanted me to get a divorce, because that definitely wasn't God's plan after I got married, was to go get a divorce. But I did that again on my own. So that whole part of my life was just basically me chasing after my own desires and doing whatever I thought that was best for me at the time without any input or anything from God. And it was just like overall a huge mistake. And I like certainly knew ahead of time that this wasn't a healthy relationship and wasn't something that I should be getting myself into. Not to sit here and say that that's an excuse to get a divorce, because it's not, but that's what happened. And that's just something that I have to live with, and that's baggage that I have moving forward from that point. And I really didn't date around or anything after that. I think I went on exactly 0 dates until I met my wife, the right one. And that's baggage that she had to take. That's something that I put on her, you know. That's something that we had to figure out together. I know that hasn't been easy for her. It hasn't been easy for us. That's just a mistake I made that I have to live with. So I met Sydney. She was the first person I went on a date with, and everything just worked out really well. I thought, I always told my family from the time we went on a first date, I said, well, she's too good for me, it's not gonna last. And my parents were just like, oh, stop, like you're just saying that, like that's not cool to say about yourself or whatever. But yeah, after the second date, I said, they're like, well, hey, how's it going? I'm like, oh, she's like amazing, she's like way too good for me. She was a salutatorian for high school. She had just graduated college. She was on the dean's list, which is like 3.9 GPA or better at Purdue. So she was like this really smart, pretty girl who hadn't ever had sex or ever smoked or done any drugs, never like tasted alcohol. I think she'd never even tasted coffee. And that's honest, that's the truth. Then there's me, and I've been through like this 10 years of a rodeo of a life, and I meet her and my family was just like, hey, how'd your date go? I was like, hey, it was really good, like probably not gonna last though. And they're like, oh, why's that? And I was like, she's just way too good for me. And we went on a second date, and I'd like still been spending like a lot of time with like my dad, and he would always ask how it went, and I was like, it's not gonna last, she's too good for me. And I don't know, it was like 5 or 6 dates in until I finally thought, well, maybe this will work out. I started to get like see a little bit of hope, but I still was pretty positive that wasn't gonna happen. I knew I liked her, and I was like trying to treat her right, and she was like everything that I was looking for, really. She's like beautiful and just really nice and smart and had like a lot going for her. She is like a big reason, like I saw her love for God. Like I was a Christian and going to church and everything, but I saw her love for God and how committed she was to God and how pure she was as a person. And that inspired me to be more of a Christian, just because I wanted to be the man that, like a man that she could like let herself be with. I just wanted to be everything that she needed in a man. So we dated for about 8 months, and then we were engaged for 5 months until we got married, which was all really good. Things were like good enough to get married. Like we just like really enjoyed spending time with each other. We went out like all the time and just went and did fun stuff, and we just kept each other on our toes. And our marriage is like so good right now that that's literally the dark time of our relationship. So we've been married for almost 2 years now, like a year and 8 months or so. And it's been the best year and 8 months of my life, and I owe it all to God. He's blessed both me and Sydney with our health and financially, like just our entire life, our happiness. I think once we got married, God has just like poured out his love and his grace on us, and we just owe everything to him. So if you take anything away from this, I would say if you would rewind my life 5 years and see that I was at rock bottom, smoking meth, doing other drugs on a daily basis, very promiscuous. If you would look at my life now, we basically have our problems are like so tiny in comparison. So like if you're in a situation that isn't that great or anything like that, I would just say like lean on God, and don't just lean on him a little bit, but put yourself in a position to where you have to lean on God. Cut ties with anybody who is a negative force in your life, and put yourself in a position to where you thank him for everything. So looking back over my life, I should probably be dead. I should have like STDs. I should be a drug addict. I should be an alcoholic. There's just so many things that should be wrong with my life right now, and not one of them is currently wrong with my life. I never had to go through withdrawal symptoms. I never had to go to rehab or anything. God just took everything that was wrong in my life, and the day that I decided to break from that, ever since then has been like green pastures. Like it wasn't always easy, like going through some of the stuff since I got saved, but it was just all so much easier than the alternative. And I just owe my entire life to God, and I hope that you can find some inspiration in this, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're going through like hard times or not. If you can just find some sort of inspiration in my life, when I say it all out loud like this, it like makes me remember how blessed I am. So comment below a part of your testimony, or how much God has done in your life, or if this inspires you to make your own video, that would be amazing. We need to get more of these out so people's lives can be changed, or to motivate people to like live for Christ and to realize how much Christ has done in their lives. And if I could give one takeaway from this, it would just be that I could not be where I'm at in my life without God, and I couldn't have done any of this on my own. So that's pretty much it. Like and subscribe, or leave a comment. That'll get this video seen by more people, and that's really my biggest goal, is just for someone to come across this video and for them to change their life. I know we're living in some perilous times right now, so I feel a calling right now to just try to tell people my story. We love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Sydney will be in the next video. We'll see you next time. Bye.